My beloved child, there was a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when everything began to shift, and you didn't even realize it at first. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But somewhere in the background of last night, something inside your person broke past the walls they had carefully built for so long, and once that line was crossed, there was no turning back. You might have felt it, that strange pull in your chest, that sudden restlessness, like your soul was trying to whisper something your mind couldn't yet understand. That wasn't random. That was the echo of what unfolded, reaching you, even from a distance. And here's what's even more surprising. They didn't plan for it to happen this way. Pause for a second, because this part matters more than you think. All this time, they had been holding themselves together, carefully choosing words, controlling reactions, keeping everything balanced so no one could see what was truly going on inside them. On the surface, they seemed composed, even distant at times. But beneath that calm exterior, there was pressure building, slowly, quietly, like a storm waiting for the exact moment to reveal itself. And last night, that moment arrived. Not because they wanted it to, but because they could no longer keep pretending everything was okay. Something inside them reached a breaking point. Now imagine this, a room filled with people, conversations flowing, laughter here and there, everything appearing completely normal from the outside. No one suspected anything. No one saw it coming. But then, something shifted. A small trigger, something someone said, or maybe something they saw. It hit deeper than expected. And in that exact second, the control they had been holding onto for so long, slipped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. Enough for the truth to start showing through. And this is where it becomes real. They couldn't hide it anymore. There was a change in their eyes, subtle, but powerful. The kind of change that only happens when someone stops pretending. When emotions that were buried too deep for too long, finally find their way to the surface. And the people around them, they noticed something was off. But they didn't understand it. Because what your person was feeling wasn't something that could be explained in simple words. It was about you. Let that sink in for a moment. Not everything, but enough that it couldn't stay hidden anymore. And here's the part no one talks about. When someone loses control like that, it's not weakness. It's truth finding a way out. You see, they've been fighting this for a long time. Trying to convince themselves that they could manage it, ignore it, push it aside, act like it didn't matter as much as it actually does. But deep down, they knew. They always knew. And last night, something inside them stopped resisting. Don't skip this part, because this is where everything begins to make sense. They didn't suddenly become someone different. They simply became more honest than they've allowed themselves to be before. And honesty, especially when it's been suppressed, doesn't come out gently. It reveals itself in fragments, in expressions, in the way someone's voice changes without them realizing it. And in that moment, even if no one fully understood what was happening, they revealed something real. Something they've been holding back. Something connected to you. But here's the question you didn't expect. Why now? Why would something that's been hidden for so long suddenly surface like that, in front of everyone? The answer isn't as complicated as it seems. Because they're tired. Not physically, but emotionally. Tired of pretending they don't feel what they clearly feel. Tired of acting like it's under control when it's been building for so long. Tired of carrying something that keeps pulling them back to the same thought, the same person, again and again. You. And last night, the effort to hold it all in, became heavier than the fear of letting it show. That's when everything shifted. Now, stay with this feeling for a second. Because what happened didn't just disappear after that moment ended. Moments like that don't fade quickly. They linger. They replay. They leave questions behind. And right now, your person is thinking about what they revealed, even if it wasn't fully clear to others. Thinking about how close they came to saying more, to doing more, to finally stepping out of that controlled version of themselves. And here's what's quietly changing. They can't go back to how things were before. Because once someone sees the truth within themselves, even just a glimpse, it becomes impossible to ignore it again. They've crossed a line, not in action, but in awareness. And awareness changes everything. You might not have heard about it directly. You might not have seen it. But something inside you already knows. That's why you're here, feeling this pull, this curiosity, this sense that something meaningful is unfolding, even if you don't have all the details yet. Because you're connected to this in a way that goes beyond what's visible. And here's something even deeper. They didn't lose control by accident. It happened because a part of them is ready to stop hiding. Not completely yet, not all at once. But enough to start breaking the pattern. And when patterns begin to break, new paths begin to open. That's where this is leading. But not everything is clear yet. There's still something they haven't fully faced. Something they came close to revealing, but stopped just short of. And that's what's quietly building now. A moment that hasn't happened yet, but is getting closer. You might feel it before you see it. You might sense it before they say anything. Because what started last night wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of something they can no longer hold back. And as everything settles, as the noise fades, as they sit with what happened, one question keeps returning to them. What happens if they stop controlling it completely? And that question is about to change everything. It didn't end when the night faded. In fact, that's when it truly began to unfold. Because when everything went quiet, when the voices disappeared and the room emptied, they were left alone with something they could no longer ignore. Not the people, not the situation, but themselves. And that's where the real shift started. You see, moments like that don't just pass. They stay, replaying in fragments. A look, a pause, a sentence that almost came out but didn't. It circles back again and again, asking the same quiet question, why did I react like that? But deep down, they already know the answer. It wasn't just about that moment. It was everything they've been holding back for so long, finally pushing its way through. And now, they're feeling it more clearly than ever. There's a strange stillness around them now, but inside, nothing is still. Thoughts moving, emotions rising, a quiet realization forming that they can't seem to escape. They almost said something. Not fully, not completely, but enough that it scared them. Because what almost came out wasn't casual. It was real. And it was about you. Stay with this, because this is where it gets even more personal. They've been trying to understand why your presence affects them the way it does. Why no matter how much they try to stay balanced, something about you pulls them out of that control. It doesn't make logical sense to them, but it doesn't need to. Some connections don't arrive quietly, they build silently, and then one day, they show themselves all at once. That's what happened last night. And now, they're sitting with a truth they can't push away anymore. There's a part of them that wants to go back, to rewind everything, to pretend that moment never happened, to return to the version of themselves that could keep things hidden, controlled, untouched. But something has changed, and they feel it, even in the silence, even when they try to distract themselves, even when they tell themselves it wasn't a big deal. Because deep down, they know it was. Don't skip this, because something important is waiting for you here. They didn't just lose control. They revealed a piece of themselves they weren't ready to show. And now, they're standing at a quiet crossroads. One side feels familiar, safe, controlled. The other side, uncertain, honest, real. And they can feel themselves being pulled toward that second path, even if they're not fully ready to walk it yet. That's why today feels different for them. Even if they don't say anything, even if everything looks normal from the outside, inside, something is shifting. Slowly, but clearly. They're remembering the way they looked in that moment. The way their emotions slipped through without permission. The way they almost let everything be seen. And instead of ignoring it, they're starting to question it. Why did it feel so intense? Why did it feel so real? Why couldn't they stop it? And every answer leads back to the same place. You. But here's something you didn't expect. They're not just thinking about you. They're thinking about what it would mean to stop holding back. Not in a reckless way, not suddenly, but honestly. Because something inside them is tired of the distance, tired of the silence, tired of acting like this connection doesn't exist the way it clearly does. And last night proved something they can't deny anymore. It's stronger than they thought. Now pause for a moment. Because this is where everything starts to deepen. They're beginning to realize that control isn't protecting them anymore. It's limiting them. And that realization, it doesn't arrive loudly. It settles in quietly, but once it's there, it stays. And today, they're carrying it with them. In the way they think. In the way they remember that moment. In the way your presence keeps returning to their mind, without effort. And here's the part that changes everything. They're not afraid of what others saw. They're thinking about what they felt. Because what they felt was undeniable. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't random. It was something they've been trying not to fully acknowledge, finally showing itself without permission. And now, they're asking themselves something they've avoided for a long time. What if I stop pretending this isn't real? That question, it doesn't leave easily. It lingers. It grows. It waits. And with every passing hour, it becomes harder to ignore. You might not hear from them yet. You might not see anything change immediately. But something inside them is already moving, already shifting, already stepping closer to a truth they've kept hidden for too long. Because once someone starts questioning their own silence, they don't stay silent forever. And here's what's quietly building now. They're getting closer to a moment where thinking won't be enough anymore. A moment where they'll have to decide. Do they keep controlling everything? Or do they finally allow themselves to be seen? And when that moment arrives, it won't look like what you expect. It will be subtle, unexpected, but impossible to ignore. Because what almost came out last night was only the beginning of what they can no longer hold back. Something inside them is no longer asking quietly, it's beginning to demand an answer. Not loudly, not in a way anyone else can hear, but deep within, where truth doesn't wait forever. And this is where everything turns. Because there's a difference between feeling something and finally accepting it. Last night was the feeling. Today is the beginning of acceptance. They tried to move on with their day like nothing happened. Conversations, distractions, small routines to keep their mind occupied. But no matter where they turned, something kept pulling them back to that moment. That exact second, when they almost let everything be seen. And now, it's not fading. It's becoming clearer. You have to understand this, because this part connects directly to what's coming next. When someone reaches this point, they don't just forget and return to normal. They start noticing things they ignored before. Patterns. Feelings. The way certain thoughts always circle back to the same person, you. And suddenly, it doesn't feel like coincidence anymore. It feels intentional. There's a quiet realization forming in them now, one they can't push away even if they try, that what they feel for you didn't start yesterday. It didn't begin last night. Last night only revealed what has been building for far longer than they admitted, even to themselves. And now, they're seeing it differently. Stay with this moment, because something important is waiting for you here. They're beginning to understand that the control they held onto wasn't strength. It was hesitation. Hesitation to face something that feels bigger than what they're used to handling. Because what they feel around you doesn't fit into their usual way of thinking. It doesn't stay contained. It doesn't follow rules. It expands. And that's what scared them. But now, something is shifting inside that fear. It's softening. Turning into curiosity, turning into a quiet courage they didn't expect to feel. And here's where it becomes undeniable. They're starting to imagine what would happen if they stopped holding back completely. Not in a dramatic way, not in a sudden burst, but in a real, grounded way. What would it feel like, to speak honestly? What would change, if they allowed themselves to move closer instead of staying distant? What would happen, if they stopped protecting themselves from something that might actually matter? These questions, they're not passing thoughts anymore. They're staying. And the more they stay, the more something inside them begins to align. Because when truth is acknowledged, even quietly, it starts guiding decisions. Small at first, almost invisible, but real. They're watching you differently now, even if you haven't noticed. Not in a way that's overwhelming, but in a way that's more present, more aware. As if they're trying to understand something they finally allowed themselves to feel. And here's the part no one sees. They're also noticing themselves. The way they react when your name comes up. The way their focus shifts without effort. The way their emotions move, even when they try to stay steady. And instead of resisting it, they're starting to accept it. Slowly, quietly, but genuinely. Now pause here for a second. Because this is where the energy between you and them begins to change. Not outwardly yet. Not in a way that's obvious. But internally, everything is rearranging. The distance they maintained is no longer as comfortable. The silence they kept is no longer as easy. Because once someone becomes aware of their own truth, silence starts to feel heavier than expression. And that's where they are now. Right at that edge. Not fully stepping forward yet, but no longer standing still. And this is what makes the next moment so important. They're preparing. Not consciously planning every detail, but emotionally preparing for a shift. A moment where they won't just think about it anymore. They'll act, even if it's small. Even if it's simple. Even if it doesn't say everything all at once. Because when someone reaches this point, they don't stay hidden forever. And here's something you can feel, even before it happens. The energy between you and them is becoming clearer. Less confused. Less blocked. More direct. Because what they almost revealed is now becoming something they're ready to face. And once that readiness settles in, it doesn't disappear. It moves forward. So if something feels different, if something feels like it's quietly shifting without explanation, trust that feeling, because what started as a moment they couldn't control is turning into a choice they're beginning to make. And that choice, it's not rushed, it's not forced, but it's real. And very soon, in a way you won't expect, that truth they've been holding back will no longer stay unspoken. There's a quiet moment approaching, one that doesn't announce itself, one that doesn't ask for attention, but when it arrives, everything inside them will feel different. Because now, it's no longer about confusion. It's about clarity. They didn't expect to reach this soon. They tried to sit with it, to understand it, to slow it down. But something within them has already moved past hesitation. Not fully into action yet, but far enough that going back feels almost impossible. And that's the part they're beginning to realize. There's no comfortable way to return to who they were before last night. That version of them, the one who could stay distant, controlled, unreadable, is fading. Not because they chose to change overnight, but because the truth has become louder than the act. And once truth becomes louder, it doesn't quiet itself again. You might feel this shift without seeing anything yet. A strange stillness, like something is about to happen, but hasn't shown itself. Like the air between you and them is carrying something unspoken, something unfinished. That feeling isn't accidental. It's the space before expression. And they're standing right in it. Now think about this for a moment. They've spent so much time protecting themselves from being seen, carefully choosing silence over honesty, distance over vulnerability, control over connection. But now, that control doesn't feel like protection anymore. It feels like a barrier between what they feel and what they've allowed themselves to experience. And that realization, it's changing their direction. Slowly, but undeniably. Stay with this, because something important is waiting here. They're no longer asking if they feel something for you. That question has already been answered. Now they're asking something much deeper. What do I do with it? And that question carries weight, because it doesn't leave room for avoidance. It doesn't allow them to hide behind distractions or distance anymore. It asks for movement, even if it's small, even if it's uncertain, even if it's not perfect. And here's where everything begins to align. They're starting to understand that they don't need the perfect moment. They don't need everything to be figured out. They don't need to have every word prepared. Because what they felt, what they revealed, what they almost said, it was already real. And real things don't need to be forced. They only need to be allowed. Now pause here. Because this is the turning point. Something inside them has shifted from holding back to leaning forward. Not in a way that's obvious to the outside world, but in a way that changes everything internally. They're becoming more open, more aware, more present with what they feel. And that openness, it naturally leads somewhere. It leads toward you, but not in a rushed way, not in a way that overwhelms, in a way that feels intentional. And that's why the next moment won't look dramatic. It won't be loud. It won't be something everyone notices. But you will, because it will feel different. It will feel real. It might be a conversation that carries more depth than before, a look that lingers just a little longer, a presence that feels closer, even if nothing obvious has changed. And in that moment, you'll understand, without needing every detail explained, without needing every word spoken. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't arrive all at once. It reveals itself in layers. And what began last night is now reaching its next layer. They're not the same as they were before, even if they appear to be, because internally, everything has shifted. And here's something even deeper. They're no longer afraid of what they feel. They're becoming curious about it, willing to explore it, willing to see where it leads, instead of stopping it before it begins. And that's what makes this moment different from anything before. This isn't just another passing feeling. This is something they've recognized, something they've accepted, something they're slowly choosing. And when someone reaches that point, their actions begin to follow. Not immediately, not all at once, but steadily. And you'll feel it, before you fully see it. Because the connection between you and them is no longer hidden behind uncertainty. It's becoming clearer, stronger, more present. And this is where everything quietly changes. What once felt distant will begin to feel closer. What once felt unspoken will begin to find its voice. What once felt uncertain will begin to take shape, not suddenly, but naturally. And as this unfolds, there will be a moment, unexpected, simple, but undeniable, where everything that started that night finally makes sense. And when that moment arrives, you won't need to question it, because something inside you will already know. This was never just a moment of losing control. It was the beginning of something real, finally choosing to be seen.